Hello again, Matthew here, and welcome to another Simple Flying video podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Senior Editor Channing Reed and Contributing Editor Jennifer Pierce. In the video, they'll be covering the following pieces of news. First up is the situation over at Spirit Airlines, which actually includes some good news for the carrier. This will be followed by an update on the joint venture between Delta Airlines and Aeromexico. Third on the list is a new Southwest Airlines policy regarding battery-powered wheelchairs and mobility devices. And this will be followed by a report that toxic fumes on commercial airliners are on the rise. And finally, Jennifer and Channing will discuss how the US Air Force has begun modifying its Qatar-gifted Boeing 747-8 for executive airlift use. So, if you're ready, let's get on with the show.
We're going to begin with Spirit Airlines. They had a very exceptional summer despite some of the recent financial concerns that they've had. The news here is that Spirit Airlines showcased its commitment and reliability and operational excellence by rising to the top of the ranks for the on-time performance this summer. Now, that's based on the Department of Transportation data for domestic flights in June, July, and August. The ultra-low-cost carrier outperformed many of the high-cost airlines this summer, coming in third overall for on-time performance among all 10 largest U.S. carriers and outperforming the majority of U.S. legacy carriers. Spirit operated more than 51,000 domestic flights during the 3-month period. Spirit's Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer John Benderatis said, quote, "Our guests don't have to choose between a reliable airline and great value when Spirit delivers both. As we prepare for the holiday season, travelers can count on us to get them where they want to go without paying top dollar to fly there. Thank you to our Spirit team and their commitment to running a great operation and taking care of our guests every day." Now, Spirit's enhanced operational excellence and performance, extends beyond the summer. The airline said it currently ranks third for on-time performance among all U.S. carriers year to date, surpassing last year's on-time performance by 6%. The carrier continued reliability and operational excellence. It comes as Spirit's current net promoter score, a metric used to measure guest satisfaction, is reportedly the highest in its history. Now, this is great news for Spirit, of course, but we can't forget what the airline is actually going through right now. It's a dire financial situation. We know that the carrier filed for bankruptcy last year, and then they exited bankruptcy earlier this year. And then late last month, the carrier filed for bankruptcy again, marking its second filing in a year. And this also followed an agreement to exchange nearly $800 million in debt for equity. Now, this restructuring hasn't affected any flights or prevented passengers from booking future flights. However, in an attempt to reduce mounting costs, the airline has been working to scale down its workforce, network, and fleet. In an open letter to its passengers, the carrier said it has taken, quote, "a proactive step to build a stronger foundation in future." Spirit filed for voluntary petitions for Chapter 11 in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court in the Southern District of New York. According to the airline, the filing will provide the necessary tools, flexibility, and time to continue discussions with its lessors, financial creditors, and other parties involved. The filing will also allow the airline to collaborate with its secured note holders, which includes, quote, "potential financing that may become necessary later in the proceedings." Now, Spirit has assets and liabilities ranging from $1 to $10 billion. That's according to the filing initially obtained by CNBC. Now, we know that this is the situation at hand right now, and the airline is continuing to look at selling some more Airbus aircraft and as well as reducing its workforce. We've reported before about the pilot furloughs, and with that, now Spirit's flight attendants are also on high alert. Hundreds of flight attendants have already been placed on leave, and the union representing those flight attendants, Association of Flight Attendants, warned its members late last month that quote, "bankruptcy will be harder and look different than last year." So it is something that we are following, and even other carriers are kind of hoping for Spirit's downfall. I don't know if you've seen that, Jennifer, but United Airlines CEO talking about, it doesn't look good for them. And it's really a scary situation, I think, for the airline. But I mean, amid the hard times, that there is something that we can, some good news out of it, which is the on-time performance, which is worth noting, because I think for the most part, when you think about on-time performance, you look at legacy carriers, right? American, Delta, United, and we've got an ultra low-cost carrier that's making a name for itself in that category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely good to share some positive news surrounding that airline for sure. So our next story, the United States Department of Transportation has ordered Delta Airlines and Aeromexico to drop their joint venture. So the United States government has directed Delta Airlines and Aeromexico to end their joint venture by January 1st, 2026. So coming right up. The decision will end the 9-year agreement, which has allowed the two airlines to coordinate schedules, pricing, and capacity for flights between the U.S. and Mexico. The Transportation Department stated the joint venture must end due to ongoing anti-competitive effects in the U.S. Mexico City markets, which it said give Delta Airlines and Aeromexico an unfair advantage. According to a report by Reuters, Delta Airlines and Aeromexico operate about 60% of passenger flights between Mexico City Airport and the United States. So let's see. The Department stated the joint venture must end, of course, I already mentioned, due to anti-competitive effects in that market, which it says is giving them an unfair advantage. In response, both Delta and Aeromexico expressed disappointment with the U.S. government's decision to terminate the partnership. It's worth noting that Delta Airlines has a 20% equity stake in Aeromexico. Nevertheless, the DOT reportedly said that it did not require Delta Airlines to sell its minority stake in the Mexican carrier. Delta has released a statement saying, "We are disappointed that the Department of Transportation has chosen to terminate its approval of the strategic and pro-competitive partnership between Delta and Aeromexico, a decision that will cause significant harm to U.S. jobs, communities, and consumers traveling between the U.S. and Mexico." Delta also stated that they are reviewing the department's order and considering next steps. So, a little background, the U.S.-Mexico Open Skies Agreement was signed in 2015 to liberate air travel between the two countries, allowing more airlines to operate routes and increasing market access for both passenger and cargo services. On the back of that, the U.S. government granted Delta Airlines and Aeromexico antitrust immunity to operate their cross-border services. That was in 2016. And so the two carriers were granted the right in 2016 to run their U.S.-Mexico operations within the framework of a joint venture, allowing them to plan and price flights jointly. The department pointed to restrictive and possibly discriminatory policies by the Mexican government that it said undermine the principles of the Open Skies Agreement. Among the concerns were reductions in permitted aircraft movements at Mexico City International Airport, as well as slot allocation practices the DOT described as restrictive and lacking transparency, which limit competition and access for U.S. airlines. Sounds like a lot of politics to me.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of politics. Yeah. And I think this is, something that we've been following since the first Trump administration tenure. And then when Biden took office, it seemed like the Biden administration was more in support of this partnership. And now with the Trump administration back, it looks like this partnership will be no more pretty soon. Watch the space and see how everything turns out. All right. Well, to another airline, Southwest Airlines passengers, there are some new restrictions that the airline will be implementing very soon for some passengers. We're talking about passengers who use wheelchairs, specifically wheelchairs that are powered by lithium mobility devices. And the airline is now saying that those passengers will have to remove the batteries and carry them into the cabin before their wheelchair is checked on the flight. Now, the new policy will take effect on September 25th, and the airline said it's part of an ongoing effort to reduce the danger of fire on board. And Jennifer, I know we've seen so many different incidents where, someone's phone, catches fire on a flight or whatever, due to those lithium batteries. So it does seem like this is a safety measure for sure. Dave Hunt, which is Southwest Vice President for Safety and Security, said the updated policy brings the airline in line with international safety standards. He said, quote, lithium batteries have become one of the most common sources of smoke and fire incidents on aircraft. While these events are rare, quick access and visibility are critical to keeping everyone on board safe. By taking proactive steps now, Southwest will be among the first U.S. carriers to adopt these higher standards. The wheelchair batteries will not count against a passenger's carry-on baggage allowance under the new policy. And I think that's probably a question that a lot of people were thinking about because, essentially you're bringing on another article on board. Now, this policy also restricts the size of lithium batteries eligible for transportation on Southwest flights to 300 watt hours or less. In a statement also obtained by USA Today, Southwest said, quote, to ease the transition, customers with batteries larger than 300 watt hours will have a grace period through January 11th, 2026, while all batteries under the 300 watt hour limit must follow the new process. After January 11th, devices with batteries above the limit will no longer be accepted for transport. Now, Southwest isn't the only airline that has restrictions, similar restrictions. American Airlines, Delta, and United also have some restrictions for the transportation of mobility device powered supplies, though each airline's rules are slightly different. Southwest previously announced that lithium power banks would need to be visible in the cabin when they're being used to recharge devices on board, and the Federal Aviation Administration warned airlines last week that they would need to evaluate their electronics fire safety procedures and messaging. So this is really important because the last thing you want to do is go on a flight and you're sitting next to someone and their device starts smoking, Definitely something that would be a huge cause for alarm. And as I mentioned, it's something that we've reported on before. So definitely a safety measure there, but hopefully this won't really affect many passengers. I think most of the time people will understand this is a safety measure and they'll follow that. And I do like that they've got that grace period there through the beginning of next year, just to allow for a more smooth and seamless transition.
Yeah. And the next story, moving into another safety issue in a completely different category. I certainly experienced it as a flight attendant, but recently the Wall Street Journal has reported that toxic fume events on commercial airliners are increasing. Now, I think this is such a critical story to cover. When we first posted it, I'm looking in the comments section all the time, like on our articles, and I was surprised that nobody was really saying anything. I would be curious to know how many people who follow us have experienced this. I certainly have, and it's really scary. So let's get into the story. A recent investigation by the Wall Street Journal has brought renewed attention to fume events on board commercial aircraft, where toxic fumes from engine oil or hydraulic fluids, I think what I experienced was a hydraulic fluid, enter cabins and cockpits through what's known as the bleed air system. Crew reports indicate the frequency of such events has climbed dramatically in recent years, with symptoms ranging from odd smells to more serious neurologic and respiratory harm. Airlines and manufacturers maintain that cabin air remains safe for passengers and crew under existing standards, and that many reported fume events are mild and transient. However, for many air crew, the effects have been anything but mild. As such, physicians involved in these cases are calling for more research. This is critical, better reporting, and stronger regulations. Data from the Wall Street Journal shows that according to FAA records, there have been thousands of fume events reported since 2010. Here's something that's super interesting, and I'm really glad that there's more information being shared about this. But it outlines or it highlights that the Airbus A320 family is a culprit and has higher statistics or fume events than other aircrafts, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the effects described by aircrew can be anywhere from blurred vision, brain fog, headaches, tremors, nausea, and then unfortunately permanent nerve or brain damage in some severe cases. So, of course, most of these, most likely, and of course, I don't know for sure, but not all fume events are equal. Some are minor, right? And others are more serious. And one central challenge is that there's no general standard for what qualifies as a fume event, its severity, or how it must be reported. And that is what I think is so important, is my question has always been, what are airlines required to disclose to passengers after passengers and crew have been exposed to something? Because I feel like, of course, as we know, the airline industry, everything moves so fast, right? So I've experienced weird stuff happens on a plane, on a flight, and then you're sort of on to the next. And you could work, or, if you're a frequent flyer, you could have multiple flights in one day. And then all of a sudden you get to your destination and you're like, wait a second, that weird thing happened. And you want to know more information, but at that point, it's kind of buried under a rug. So I certainly hope that's not happening in these instances. I hope that airlines are being transparent and also, digging in and doing proper research on the cause. And that's just, my own personal opinion. The design of most commercial jets include bleed air systems, which take compressed air from the engines to pressurize the cabin. If engine seals degrade or leak, oil and hydraulic fluid can seep into that airflow and vaporize under heat, releasing contaminants. Some of the comments on this article have been pretty interesting. There's only a few, but someone noted maybe they need to check these seals more often. I'm not sure. I don't really know what the solution is, but like I said, the Airbus A320 has been the biggest culprit behind the rise in recent fume events, which is interesting to me, with the type experiencing more than 7 times the number of fume events than the Boeing 737. On the positive side, and I think this is really important, Airbus has begun implementing what it calls Project Fresh, aimed at redesigning parts of the A320 family to reduce odor and fume events. However, this would only apply would only apply to newly built aircraft starting in 2026. So at least it does seem like there's more attention being drawn to the matter. And also manufacturers, at least, and airlines too, I think I read, are doing something about it. That's important. So interesting story. And I'm certainly glad that we're talking about it and that it's being covered. When I became a flight attendant, we all knew that there is no such thing as a completely 100% safe, situation or scenario in transport. It just doesn't exist. So we knew we were signing up for something dangerous, but also, you want people to be accountable, companies, and, for people's health, because at least for me, I'm very health conscious, and
right, absolutely.
I want to know the details behind those things. And of course, some of this stuff is my opinions and based off of my experience. But yeah, a super interesting story. And hopefully we can see some improvements or, a decrease in fume events eventually.
Yep, something we'll have to continue to watch with this. And like you said, hopefully airlines will remain accountable when it comes to this situation. We are going to switch gears and talk about a luxury Boeing 747-8 that was gifted from Qatar. So if anyone is familiar with this story, the Air Force has started upgrading a 747 that the government of Qatar donated to the U.S. this summer. And this plane, a very expensive plane, is reportedly going to serve as an interim Air Force One. That's according to the Trump administration.
Right.
And this is because the current replacement for the Air Force One, which are two Boeing 747-8s that Boeing has been working on, they've been severely delayed due to several different reasons. But President Trump has said he wants to modify the aircraft, this incoming Qatar-gifted 747-8, quickly so that it can be put into use as the new Air Force One, as I mentioned. However, the plane, which industry executives estimated its worth is about $200 million, it's going to require extensive work before it can be considered secure enough to carry President Trump and other senior officials. Now, in a statement this week, this was obtained by the New York Times. The Air Force said it was modifying the 747 for, quote, executive airlift support. And this is on the orders of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. All other details about the aircraft are classified and they could not be shared. And the whole idea of a new or interim Air Force One really has caught the attention of a lot of people because there was questions about whether this is, the legalities of the matter. Is this really, allowed, essentially? But we do know that Boeing has been working on developing those two modified 747-8s to become the replacements for the aged 747-200s that have served as presidential transport aircraft for decades. But as I mentioned, significant complications have pushed back the delivery timeline to at least 2027. So if we're looking at this timeline right now, we're pretty much done with 2025, right? We've got only a few more months. We've got 2026, and then the next year is when the Air Force is planning on taking delivery of the original 747 Air Force One replacement. So we're looking at about a year or so, depending on how long it would take for the Air Force to get this new aircraft up to the requirements needed for presidential transport. So definitely something we're going to have to watch as the days and months go on. But a lot of people don't think that this is going to actually end up becoming an interim Air Force One because it's going to take them a long time to modify the aircraft. But what we do know right now is that they have started the modifications for this plane. And all we can do at this point, I guess, is to watch the space and see what happens. Now, some people have also asked about what's going to happen after the Trump administration and when President Trump leaves office. Mr. Trump has said the plane will be transferred to the yet-to-be-created Trump Presidential Library, and that will happen after he leaves office in 2029. But that is it for today's podcast. We do hope you enjoyed it, and we welcome any feedback you might have at editorial@simpleflying.com.
For more great content, you can visit our website at simpleflying.com or find us on social media. Simply search for Simple Flying.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a rating on your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
In addition to our daily YouTube videos, Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles and a podcast every week. Visit simpleflying.com.